when the sky tore open and the sea swallowed his past, a man who had everything woke to find nothing, except the heart of a woman who had never known luxury, only love. Now let me tell you how this incredible story unfolded. Subscribe, share your heart in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from, because your support keeps these stories alive. Now, let's begin. The hum of engines had always been Ethan Hale's lullaby, a sound that told him he was in control, above the world, untouchable. But control was an illusion he'd been chasing for years, ever since his father's voice began echoing in his head. "A Hale earns his wings, son. Money means nothing if you don't prove you deserve it." Now 32, heir to Hale Aviation, the largest private aircraft company in the country, Ethan wore confidence like armor. Yet beneath his tailored exterior was a man still trying to impress a father who never once said, "I'm proud of you." That evening, the private hangar buzzed with tension. A rare prototype jet engine component, valued at millions, needed urgent transport across the sea for a high-stakes corporate deal. The cargo was irreplaceable, a symbol of Hale Aviation's future. But the weather reports were grim. Storm warnings blinked red on every monitor. "No one's flying in that storm," Chief Pilot Andrews had warned. "Visibility's near zero. We wait until morning." Ethan's jaw tightened. Waiting meant losing the deal, and his father's last shred of faith. "If we lose that contract, we lose everything," Ethan snapped. "I'll take it myself." Andrews stepped forward. "Sir, your father would—" "My father built this company by taking risks," Ethan cut in. "If he wants proof I can lead, he'll get it tonight." He didn't wait for permission. The air was thick with the smell of jet fuel and defiance as he climbed into the cockpit of his sleek creation, the Falcon 4. The rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier, as if the sky itself tried to hold him back. From the observation deck, his father appeared, silver hair slick with rain, cane planted in the concrete, eyes filled with both fury and fear. "You think flying that thing through a storm makes you a man? Or just reckless enough to lose everything I built?" Ethan forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sometimes you have to risk the storm to prove you can fly through it." The old man said nothing, just turned away, leaving silence heavy enough to bruise. When Ethan lifted off, the storm was a distant hum on the horizon. He gripped the controls, heart pounding in rhythm with the engine. This flight wasn't just about a delivery. It was about redemption. The precious cargo in the hold was more than machinery. It was a symbol of his worth. Miles away, in a quiet coastal village where dawn and dusk painted the sea in gold, Liana Torres hauled nets from her father's boat. Salt water stung her hands, but she barely noticed. Her world was humble. Tides, toil, and the sound of gulls. After her mother's passing, she became both caretaker and dreamer, whispering her hopes to the sea. That night, as the villagers tied down their boats against the brewing storm, lightning split the sky. Liana looked out over the restless waves and saw a faint streak of light. A plane's descent swallowed by darkness. Something deep inside her stirred. Fear, curiosity, destiny. She whispered, "Someone's out there." For Ethan, the storm wasn't just thunder and wind. It was every unspoken word between him and his father, every doubt, every demand. When lightning struck the wing, alarms screamed. The cockpit shook. The ocean rose to meet him, black, merciless, infinite. And in that shattering instant, the air of Hale Aviation vanished into darkness. Have you ever risked everything just to prove your worth, only to realize what really mattered wasn't what you were chasing? Share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes the hardest storms lead us right where we're meant to land. The world fractured into chaos. Rain slammed against the windshield as Ethan fought the controls, lightning illuminating flashes of terror in the cockpit. The precious cargo, the sealed crate of prototype components, rattled violently in the hold. Alarms screamed, but the roar of wind drowned everything. "Come on, stay with me," he muttered, voice trembling. The plane jerked sideways as the storm hurled it like a toy. For one final instant, the city lights were behind him. Civilization, safety, the life he knew. Then came the flash, a white explosion that swallowed the sky. The Falcon 4 spiraled downward, slicing through the clouds. Ethan's breath came ragged, his vision blurred. He reached for the photo taped to the dashboard. His father and him at the first Hale Aviation launch, smiling once, long ago. "I'll prove it, Dad," he whispered. Then everything went black. The sea was merciless that night. The villagers huddled in their homes, waves battering the shore with a violence that felt biblical. But Liana Torres couldn't stay inside. Something about that falling light haunted her. With her lantern clutched tight, she ran toward the docks, her brother calling after her. The beach was chaos. Thunder rolling, wind tearing at her hair. When she saw it, a flicker of metal among the shattered waves. A wing, and beside it, a body. "Dear God," she gasped, wading into the freezing water. The current nearly dragged her under, but she fought through it, her arms trembling as she grabbed the stranger by the shoulders. His face was bloodied, his lips pale, but his chest still rose. Barely. "Hold on," she cried over the wind. "You're not dying tonight." It took every ounce of her strength to pull him ashore. When the waves finally released him, she collapsed beside him in the sand, gasping, her lantern flickering weakly between them. The man's eyes fluttered open, gray-blue, unfocused, lost. He coughed seawater and whispered hoarsely, "Where am I?" "You're safe," Liana said, brushing the wet hair from his forehead. "You crashed. I found you." He stared at her blankly. "Crashed? Who? Who am I?" Her breath caught. "You don't remember?" He shook his head weakly, then winced, clutching his temple. "Nothing. I don't know my name." She swallowed hard, heart pounding. The sea thundered behind them, erasing footprints as fast as they were made, as if the world itself wanted to wipe away who he had been. "Then maybe it's best to rest," she murmured, helping him sit up. "You're lucky to be alive." He looked around, at the vast, unfamiliar shoreline, at her lantern's glow trembling in the wind. Something in her eyes steadied him. For the first time since the storm began, Ethan felt an emotion he hadn't known he needed. Peace. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Don't thank me yet," Liana replied softly. "The storm isn't over." Hours later, as dawn stretched over the sea, the wreckage of the Falcon 4 drifted toward the reef, broken wings glinting under sunlight. The cargo crate sank beneath the surface, vanishing into silence. And so did Ethan Hale. The millionaire, the heir, the son. All that remained was a man with no name, saved by a woman who had nothing to offer but kindness. If you lost every memory of who you were, would you still be the same person inside? Or would that be your chance to start over? Tell us your thoughts. Could love begin when everything else is gone? The world Ethan awoke to was nothing like the one he'd left behind. Salt air drifted through the window of a small wooden cottage overlooking the bay. The rhythmic crash of waves replaced the hum of engines. For days he drifted in and out of consciousness, feverish, haunted by flashes of lightning, metal, and his own voice shouting through the roar of the storm. When he finally opened his eyes for good, The first thing he saw was Liana, her hair tied loosely, her hands soaked in warm water as she wiped the salt from his brow. "You're awake," she said quietly, as though afraid sound might break the fragile peace. He nodded, throat dry. "Where am I?" "You're in Coral Bay," she answered. "Our village. You've been unconscious for 3 days. I found you on the shore." He looked around. The walls were made of driftwood and woven palms, the scent of salt and soup filling the air. His clothes hung, cleaned and patched, by the door. It felt impossibly humble and strangely safe. "You said before you didn't remember your name," she continued. "Has anything come back?" He hesitated. "Nothing," he murmured, frustration edging his voice. "Just fragments. A storm. A plane, maybe." She frowned slightly, studying him. "Then perhaps you were a pilot?" He managed a faint, uncertain smile. "A pilot who can't remember how to fly." Days turned into weeks. Ethan grew stronger, helping Liana's family around the village, mending nets, carrying water, learning to fix the boat engine under her father's careful watch. The villagers took to calling him Kai, meaning from the sea. But as much as he adapted, a shadow of unease followed him. He'd wake from dreams drenched in sweat, images of steel hangars, the sound of jet engines, a voice calling his name from somewhere far away. He'd walk to the cliffs, staring at the endless horizon, feeling something deep inside urging him, "Go back. Remember." Liana often joined him, standing beside him in quiet understanding. She didn't press for answers, but sometimes her gaze lingered, curious, searching. "You look at the sea like it's keeping your secret," she said once. He chuckled softly. "Maybe it is." "Then maybe it's time you make peace with it," she replied. Her words stayed with him. There was something about her steadiness, her ability to find beauty in simplicity, that both comforted and unsettled him. One afternoon, while helping repair the fishing nets, a storm alert echoed through the village. The smell of rain swept in. For Ethan, the thunderclap triggered something visceral, panic surging through his chest. He froze, eyes wide, breath shallow. Liana reached out. "Kai?" "I can't," he gasped, clutching his head as flashes returned. The cockpit, alarms, his father's voice. She steadied him, holding his hands until the tremors eased. Her touch grounded him, the warmth pulling him back from the fragments of his forgotten life. When he could finally breathe, he whispered, "Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life, like I wasn't meant to be here." Liana looked at him gently. "Maybe you were. Maybe you were brought here to start again." He turned to her, eyes searching hers. "Do you really believe that?" "I have to," she said softly. "Otherwise, nothing that happens in this life makes sense." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The waves outside sounded like whispers, not of the sea, but of the life he'd lost. He looked out the window toward the horizon and realized something terrifying. He didn't know if he wanted his memories back. Because every time Liana smiled at him, the emptiness inside didn't feel like a loss anymore. It felt like freedom. If forgetting your past meant finding peace, would you want to remember? Or would you choose to start over? Share your thoughts below. Could love born in the unknown ever survive the truth? The storm that rolled in that week was nothing like the one that had brought Ethan to Coral Bay. This one was slower, a patient, relentless rain that blurred the horizon and grounded the village boats for days. It was Liana's father who suggested it first. "If the rain keeps up, Kai will have to stay here until the repairs are done," he said, wringing seawater from his hat. Liana's heart gave an unexpected flutter she quickly smothered. The small cottage became their refuge. The outside world shrank to the sound of waves and the soft creak of the roof under rain. They cooked together, or rather, Liana cooked, and Ethan burned things. He laughed at himself more than she did, and each shared smile chipped away at the distance between them. One night, lightning split the sky, and the power flickered out. Liana lit a small oil lamp, its glow dancing between them. Ethan leaned back, watching her from across the table. "You make this place feel like home," he said quietly. She looked up, caught off guard. "Home? You don't even know where you're from." "Maybe I don't need to," he murmured, gaze steady. "Maybe home is this." Her pulse quickened. She turned away, pretending to check the stew, but her hands trembled slightly. He had no memory, no past, yet every word he spoke carried a weight she couldn't ignore. Over the next few days, they worked together to salvage parts of the wreckage that had washed ashore. The beach, once a graveyard of twisted metal, became their shared project. They scavenged what they could, not for value but for closure. Liana found him one afternoon sitting on a piece of the plane's wing, tracing the engraved letters. H.A. "Do you think this meant something to you?" she asked. He shrugged, eyes distant. "Maybe. But the more I try to remember, the more it hurts." She stepped closer. "Then stop trying. Maybe whoever you were wasn't as good a man as the one you're becoming now." He looked up sharply, her words both a comfort and a wound. "And if remembering means losing this?" he asked softly. "Losing you?" Liana froze. The air between them shifted. Fragile, charged. "Don't say things you don't mean," she whispered. "I mean everything I've said since the day I woke up," he replied. "Because this..." He gestured around them. The sea, the village, her, is the only thing that feels real. The silence that followed was thick, trembling. Rain pattered like a heartbeat on the roof. Then, without planning it, she reached out and rested her hand over his. "You're real, Kai," she said softly. "That's enough for now." He nodded, eyes glistening. "Then I'll hold on to that." That night, as they stood on the porch watching the rain fade into mist, Liana caught herself leaning against him, her head brushing his shoulder. It felt natural, inevitable. He didn't move away. For the first time since his crash, Ethan felt whole. Not because he'd remembered who he was, but because, with her beside him, he didn't need to. Have you ever felt at home with someone, even when nothing else in your life made sense? Tell us in the comments. Maybe home isn't a place at all, but a heartbeat beside yours. The sun returned after days of rain, painting Coral Bay in a gold that almost felt too peaceful to be real. Ethan, or Kai, as everyone still called him, stood on the shore, running his fingers through the surf. The tide whispered secrets he couldn't yet understand. Behind him, Liana watched from the dunes. She could tell something in him had shifted. He'd grown quieter, restless, eyes always on the horizon. When she approached, he didn't turn around. "The ocean feels familiar," he said softly. "Like it's trying to tell me something." She swallowed hard. "Maybe it's time to listen." He looked at her. The woman who'd pulled him from death, who'd given him peace, who'd taught him to laugh again. And for a moment, he looked afraid. "Liana, what if I don't like who I was before?" She stepped closer, brushing his arm with her fingertips. "Then you start over. We all have things we'd rather forget. But what if remembering means losing this?" Her eyes glistened. "Then maybe we'll both have to be brave." That night, as he slept, the memories came, not as gentle fragments this time, but as a storm crashing through his mind. He was in the cockpit again, alarms blaring, wind howling. His father's voice. "You think you can lead this company by defying me?" The cargo, the prototype, the desperate need to prove his worth. Lightning, impact. Then, her voice, Liana's voice, calling from the shore. Ethan jolted awake, drenched in sweat. His heart thundered. He stumbled outside into the moonlight, gasping. The memories had returned, and with them, the truth. He wasn't Kai. He was Ethan Hale, heir to Hale Aviation, missing for months, the world likely believing him dead. When Liana found him by the water's edge, he was trembling. "Ethan," he said before she could speak. "My name is Ethan Hale." The sound of it felt foreign on his tongue, and yet it unlocked everything. The wealth, the company, the father, the life waiting far beyond this shore. Liana froze. "Ethan Hale? The missing pilot from the news?" He nodded slowly. "I remember everything." Silence settled between them, heavy, shattering. The wind seemed to carry away the fragile world they'd built. "So it's true," she whispered. "You're one of them." He stepped forward. "Liana, please, nothing's changed." She shook her head, backing away. "Everything's changed. You don't belong here. You never did." "You're wrong," he said, his voice breaking. "This," he gestured between them, "is the only thing that's ever felt right." Tears welled in her eyes. "You have a life waiting for you, Ethan. A father, a company, people who need you." "No," he said softly. "I needed you." Her breath hitched. She wanted to believe him, but she'd seen too many men with promises they couldn't keep. "You were never meant to stay," she said, forcing her voice steady. "And I can't hold on to something that was never mine." Then she turned and walked away, her silhouette swallowed by the dark. The next morning, the villagers found Ethan packing his few belongings. A borrowed shirt, his watch rusted from salt water, and the engraved fragment of his plane's wing. He left a note for her on the windowsill. "You saved my life. You taught me how to live. But I can't forget you, even if I remember everything else." As he walked toward the waiting rescue helicopter that had finally arrived, he looked back once at the shoreline. Liana stood there, the wind tangling her hair, tears glinting like the sea. Two worlds, one heartbeat, both breaking. Would you walk away from the only love that healed you, if going back meant betraying the life you once had? Tell us in the comments. Sometimes, remembering hurts more than forgetting. Winter sunlight spilled across the skyline of Hale Aviation's headquarters, catching on the sleek curve of restored aircraft wings. Ethan Hale stood by the window, the city humming far below. Contracts were signed, investors satisfied, his father's company thriving again. Yet victory tasted hollow. Every triumph echoed with the memory of ocean waves and a woman's laughter carried by wind. He touched the small seashell he kept in his pocket, the one Liana had once placed in his hand the night before he'd left. "To remind you that peace isn't found in the sky," she'd said, "but in the stillness beneath it." Months of silence had followed. He'd thrown himself into work, rebuilt everything he'd lost, except her. Until the letter arrived. "Dear Ethan, Coral Bay is quiet again. I hope you found what you were looking for. The sea still whispers your name when it rains. Liana." He read it twice, then made his decision. When Ethan arrived at Coral Bay, the village shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. Fisherman waved in surprise, the man they'd once called Kai, returning in a pressed white shirt and polished shoes, a small velvet box tucked into his jacket. Liana was by the dock, mending nets. The moment she saw him, the needle slipped from her fingers. "Ethan." Her voice barely carried over the surf. He smiled, nervous, hopeful. "You said once that maybe the sea brought me here to start again. You were right. But I realized something. I don't want to start again without you." She shook her head slowly, torn between disbelief and joy. "You don't belong here anymore." "No," he said, stepping closer. "You belong with me. In my world. Our world." He reached into his pocket and opened the small box. Inside lay a delicate ring shaped like a wave curling into a wing, the sea and the sky intertwined. "Marry me, Liana. Come with me. Not because I want to change you, but because you changed me. You made me remember what truly matters, and I want to build a life where both our worlds meet." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "Ethan, I don't know anything about your world. I've never even been on a plane." He smiled softly. "Then let me be your pilot. Just once more. I'll show you what it looks like when dreams have room for two." For a long, trembling moment, she said nothing. Then she took the ring, slipped it onto her finger, and whispered, "Yes." The villagers cheered as he lifted her into his arms, laughter mingling with the sound of waves. Weeks later, the private airstrip buzzed with quiet anticipation. Liana stood beside the newly rebuilt Falcon 4, her reflection shining in its polished surface. Ethan, in his pilot's jacket, offered his hand. "Ready to see the sky that almost took me and gave me you?" She nodded, gripping his hand tightly. "As long as we land together." The engines roared to life, smoother than before. As the plane ascended, the coastline of Coral Bay stretched below them. The same sea that had once swallowed his past, now blessing his future. At 30,000 feet, Ethan turned to her. "You know what I realized?" She smiled. "That you finally proved yourself?" He shook his head, eyes soft. "That I don't need to anymore. Because love doesn't need proving. It just needs choosing." Liana leaned against him, gazing through the window as sunlight poured over the clouds like liquid gold. They would marry that summer. A small ceremony at the hangar where his father's portrait hung. The ocean would be their witness, its winds carrying whispers of redemption and new beginnings. Ethan Hale, once lost to the storm, had found his way home, not to power, but to love that reached beyond memory and into forever. The storm that once tore him from the sky became the wind beneath their wings. The sea that once swallowed his past now reflected his future. If love asked you to leave everything familiar behind, would you take that leap? Tell us in the comments. Maybe true love isn't found in calm skies, but in the courage to fly through storms together. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. If even a single moment, a look, or a word touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what part made you feel the most. Your words, your support, they're what keep this family of stories alive. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. The next story is even deeper, more powerful, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Click the video on your screen. Your next story begins there.